Everybody. I'm Dave Forrest. This is our Tales from the Probate Front, in which we have our storytellers as long stories that they've come across. As you know, law is passed down a lot of ways, and a lot of the ways it's been done is by storytelling. And while life is changing on us, storytelling still has its place. And primarily, you'll find that in litigators tell a lot of stories, some which are actually true. And as I learned 5 years ago when we did this last time, most probate attorneys start a story with, okay, this guy dies or mom dies, and then off they go on their story. So that's pretty much the premise we're going off of. We've got a number of presenters here. Some have switched out, some have not been able to make it. One of whom is trapped up north and somehow found a way to sit in his car and do this, is Mr. Simasko. So, Pat, can you unmute yourself? Or have I muted him?
No, he should be able to.
Pat, can you hear me? Okay. I've got you muted. Are you unmuted on your end? All right. So where was that? We saw that before, right? Where was that?
Should find his name over and
Okay. I'm trying to get Pat.
to participants.
Yeah. Share. By the way, this is my lovely assistant, Audra Woods. So let me just get this so somebody's not muted.
Oh.
All right, good. So yeah.
Got it now. Hey guys.
Yeah, you're there now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm up at the cottage. Sorry. I was doing
We're not
some
going to feel sorry for you,
chainsawing.
Pat. We're not feeling sorry for you at all, but we do want to hear your story. So lead us off, please.
I was talking to Scott and my brother Jim about that, and the question is, what kind of stories do we want to hear? The cute, fun ones, or the oh God, it happened to me ones? So the only story I had, and it's not a probate story, but it's kind of dealing with the older people and dementia. A 93-year-old lady comes into my office with her niece who's about 70, and she wants to get a divorce from her 88-year-old husband who filed divorce on her. I go, why in the hell are you getting divorced at this age? And she goes, my husband thinks I'm a lesbian and I'm having a lesbian affair with my 70-year-old niece. And I go, well, stop it, and he'll probably bring you back into the house. Well, long story short, during the divorce process, we're representing her, and he literally hires an undercover hitman to kill the niece and to kill me as the lawyer. The Bloomfield Township Police Department called me and warned me about it, and he ended up going to jail for conspiring to hire a hitman. And while he was in jail, after the divorce, he got half of the assets. He hooked up with a transvestite and gave all of his assets to the transvestite in jail. So, long story short, that's the weirdest thing that ever happened in my office.
And Pat, yes, that was a weird tale.
That was a weird one. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
weird.
you. So, all right, thanks. Next, we're going to go to one of our veterans whose story he told 5 years ago. I still remember about that chair. And to him, I want to wish him a happy International Whiskey Day, because John and I, well, yeah, you know who you are now. John and I both enjoy Scotch.
I do.
So, John, if you would, pass up, give us another story.
Thank you, David. And I've got actually 4 what I call probate sniglets, which are just little short ones, but they add up to less than 5 minutes without the introduction. Um, what this first one is, Judge Marlinga was on the bench, and I was in front of him on a hearing, and he was very interested in the TV show series Breaking Bad, and he knew that I had the DVDs and the videos, and I had been sharing those videos with him. So opposing counsel and I approach, we get to where we're supposed to be and enter our appearances. And the first thing Marlinga says is, "Did you bring season 4?" And I said, "Yes, Your Honor, I did." I said, "Have you got season 3 to turn in?" And he said, "I do." And he hands up, and he says, approach and all that good stuff. So I went up and handed him season 4, and he gave me season 3 back. And then I went back to the podium and looked to my left at opposing counsel, who has this look on his face like, are you kidding me? I mean, this had to be in open court. But he got through all the seasons, and some of them I just would give him a plain manila envelope. But a couple times we traded DVDs after we'd already put our appearances on the record. Another one, it comes from a funeral home in Almont, where I had a highly contentious family that wasn't getting along very well. And as I pulled into the funeral home, there was another couple walking up the front steps, and the front door opened, and we could kind of hear some yelling. And one of the sisters had her other sister over her shoulder and was spinning her around like one of these world wrestling moves, and threw her into the bushes in front of the funeral home. And I said to the couple who was standing there that were kind of surprised at all this, and I said, well, there's something you don't see every day. And they were able to get things calmed down inside, but the one had to go home and change and put a new outfit on. Another time, another sniglet is, I was in front of Judge Nowicki, and I knew that he was kind of a fan of the Three Stooges. And for whatever reason, something snapped. I put my appearance on the record with my name as being from the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. And I remember the court reporter looking up at me and kind of whispering, "I thought you were Stan Hurt and those guys." And I said, "Not anymore." And so it went down as Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe in the record. But the last one comes from when I was being sworn in by Judge Nowicki as with your right hand up, as I believe a trustee on the probate bar, or a director in the Probate Bar Association some years ago. And he did the classic thing from Animal House, and we had, or a couple had us, I state your name. So of course that's what I repeated. And he just shook his head and he said, "There's always one." Because I said, "I state your name," because he had said, "Repeat after me." So I was just doing as I was told. And as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I have to say about that. As you
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. And we're going to pivot to a different style now. A lot of you know him. If you don't, you should get to know him. John Coleman is joining us. John, what do you have for us? John, you got to unmute first.
Thanks, Dave. Takes me a minute. Sorry about that. Well, those are tough acts to follow. I thought about a few of the better ones that I've experienced, and I thought, some of these I better not, could be privileged. Some of these maybe not appropriate in polite company, maybe over a beer if I see some of you out on a different type of occasion. But one is actually pretty recent, and I thought this is a good one to share because it's never happened to me before. I'd be surprised if it's happened to any one of you, and I'd be shocked if it ever happened to me again. I was in a highly contentious, as most of them are, but I mean, this took it to another level, a highly contentious trust dispute through 2023 and all the way up through 2025. And the dispute centered around two irrevocable trusts that were set up for the children of the decedent and his second wife. Through a whole series of maneuvers, the second wife had managed to get rid of a couple of professional fiduciaries through harassment, filing false police reports, just anything she could do to get rid of these people. They all resigned. She was ultimately able to, by going down the list of trustees, get an old law school friend of hers. She was a non-practicing attorney, but still remained licensed in the state of Michigan. She was able to get an old law school friend of hers to become the trustee. He really wasn't fit to be a trustee, but that's a different issue. And he ultimately gave her about $2 million, emptied these two trusts out, and just gave it all to her, even though there were multiple other lifetime beneficiaries and then ultimate residuary beneficiaries on both of these trusts. Well, this lady, this beneficiary, after we filed suit against the trustee and against her, seeking to return $2 million in trust assets that had been distributed improperly, I represented the children. She decided she would represent herself. The trustee hired counsel and wisely got out of it about a year and a half in, settled with my clients, but she remained in, and all the way up until essentially 2 weeks before trial, she represented herself. And at one hearing in particular, she appeared via Zoom. She was down in Florida. She had, in the middle of the trial, moved from Michigan to Florida. I think she thought that would insulate her in some way from the proceedings. But she was appearing by Zoom. And we were in front of Judge O'Brien, who many of you know, in Oakland County. And she was sitting there on Zoom, and she was wearing like an ace bandage around her head. She was always trying to play the sympathy card. I think her arm may have been in a sling as well. And Judge O'Brien is saying something to her. I don't know, arguing with her about something. She was very argumentative. And she reaches down and she picks up a cigarette and takes a puff and sort of like lets the smoke waft away. And Judge O'Brien goes, "What are you doing? You can't smoke in my courtroom." And she says, "I'm not in your courtroom. I'm in my living room." And he goes, "Ma'am, when you're appearing via Zoom, that's an extension of my courtroom, and you cannot smoke cigarettes in my courtroom." And she looks dead into the camera and goes, "This isn't a cigarette. It's my medicine." And goes back and takes another puff of what turned out to be a marijuana cigarette. Well, Judge O'Brien, for those of you who know him, did not take well to that. She was muted and her screen was shut down on his end. And ultimately, several months later, we ended up with a $2 million judgment against her, which my clients are still trying to collect on in Florida. So good luck to them. God bless. But that's my story. And I hope you all enjoyed it.
That's a good one, John. Thank you. Speaking of judges, let's pivot over to our own judge. Judge Harrison has graciously decided to join us. So go ahead, Judge.
Hi, everybody. Sorry to be joining late, but I had to hurry up and eat my lunch while I'm listening to you because I'm in a trial right now that next year will be on the tails from probate court. Just saying. You'll have to ask Mr. Hytmanis or Liz about it. So I thought I would tell our practitioners today, because I've already told you so many stories at other meetings about what I can tell, because there's so much that I can't tell. But I thought I'd tell you one today about a jury. So most of us know that juries don't always get it right. They do things that sometimes are quite shocking. This jury in particular that I had was on a civil case, and I checked all of the pictures here to make sure the attorneys were not on today, and they're not. But this particular jury trial was a few days, and this was a really interesting jury. So they were quite bonded after the first day. They were all buds, and we could hear them every time there was a recess or something. They were cracking up in the jury room and just carrying on, and we're thinking, wow, this really isn't that interesting of a trial, but they're really, they're having a good time, and it was all fine. So it got to the point where they were deliberating. We had to excuse one of the panel, who was so disappointed and ended up staying and watching the trial, or waiting for the verdict to come out during the deliberations. And again, we're hearing all this racket coming from the jury room. So when everything's done, Gail is always so kind that she brings all sorts of snacks and coffee and all sorts of stuff for jury trials. And so she went in their room to clean up, and she calls me in there and she shows me what's on the whiteboard. And this just gives us a little insight into what these jurors are actually doing when they're in there deliberating. So they had made an elaborate illustration on the whiteboard, drawing each of the characters that were involved in the trial and writing their little commentary underneath each character. And by the way, this jury did get it right and had the particular defendants in this case illustrated with some flames coming out and liar, liar, pants on fire. So that's my story.
Thank you for that. That's a good one.
You're welcome.
I've had a number of stories myself with jury trials. We go talk to them after, and we ask them, what was significant to you? And they'll come up with things that myself and opposing counsel look at each other and just try not to bust out and leave and realize that they were focused on something that had nothing to do with anything important in the case. Yeah. So thanks, Judge. Speaking of being in trial, one of your witnesses today is also scheduled here. Ben, are you there somewhere?
I'm here, Dave.
All right, Ben Schock, prior president, and God willing, I'm going to join him as prior president really soon, I hope. Is due next. Ben, give us some.
All right. I've been doing this for 20 years now, so I've got a few tales, but I'm gonna stick to one that's always stood out in my mind. And I think the court has always taken some level of humor in some of the appointments I get. So this goes back way before the current judges were there, but they were looking for somebody to be a attorney for a proposed ward who needed a guardian and conservator. So I get a call and I didn't ask any questions. I just said, sure, Your Honor, I'll take it. So I go out and meet with the man, and the house was in St. Clair Shores, and I arrive at the home, and it's a normal looking St. Clair's home ranch. Um, Gentleman's really well dressed. He comes to the door. He's got a bow tie on. He's got a three-piece suit. He kind of looked a little bit like Tim Kohler if you get that look. Um, but he comes to the door, and I introduce myself. I say, hi, I'm Ben Schock. I'm your court-appointed counsel. He's like, oh, come on in. So we sit down and we start having a conversation in his living room. And a few minutes go by and he kind of indicates he doesn't want a guardian, doesn't want a conservator, but he was really interested in showing me his house. So, to accommodate him, I said, sure, I'll take a tour. Show me of what you're proud of. So he takes me down. He's like, first, I want to show you my basement. And we walk into the basement, and it's a normal basement when you start going down the steps. It's got wood steps and floor that's normal, kind of a linoleum style floor. And then I go in there, and it's got the standard poles that hold up the subfloor to the second level. Well, on each one of the poles, they were painted silver, mirrored silver, and he had built stands around them that were carpeted. He had turned his basement into his own private strip club. I get down there and I'm modest and I'm talking to him and I start asking questions, and he was telling me how he would go to adult venues and he would invite girls back to do private performances for him. So, this was an APS case, and one of the allegations is there was a constant flow of traffic to and from his home. And that wasn't even the most scary part. The next thing he wanted to show me is he had built a storage room in the back. And he was dying to show me the storage room. And I walked in the storage room, and this storage room would make the velvet touch blush. There was so many porno videos. I have never seen that many in my entirety. And they were all categorized. So like if you looked at them, there was like you could see what the main content was the video and by rows, and they were alphabetized. And this guy took a lot of time and a lot of effort categorizing and alphabetizing his collection of adult videos. So, I thanked him for the opportunity to review the collection and graciously went upstairs, and we sit down, and he's like, I understand they want to get a guardian for me. And he says, I don't want the court to appoint a neutral, but I want them to appoint my friend. And he introduces his friend as Michelle, and Michelle is going to be there in a few minutes. So I talked to him, and Michelle showed up, and she pulls up in a rather nice car, Cadillac of sedan of some sort. She comes in and she sits down and she's like, hello, this is who I am, but you can call me Precious. And I started cracking up because I realized that Precious was her stage name. He was asking to have his stripper friend appointed as his guardian and conservator. Needless to say, this went through the full gamut and the full trial, and eventually Mr. Heitmanis became his guardian, and we ended up filing multiple petitions. And one of the final sticking points in this was he was moved into an adult assisted living, and he missed his video collection. So we had to file a petition to allow him to bring some of his videos with him to the adult assisted living, which became an issue at a later point because he was hard of hearing. I laugh about this story quite a bit because it still makes me blush. I've never seen that many videos, and I hope I never do again. But I hope you guys enjoyed the story, and we'll look forward to some other ones.
Thank you, Ben. Now I know why they call it adult assisted living. I never knew that before. All right. The only person that could possibly follow you is your landlord. Dan, are you ready?
I am ready. Unfortunately, I get too many of these, and the hardest part was like minimizing what I was going to say. So let me start with, this is a true story. The events discussed occurred in Macomb County with a trial memorializing all these facts in 2022. The names have not been changed. Rather, people are identified in my story as stated in the trial transcripts. The details are absolutely true, and the judge remains on the bench. The matter was a trial involving the distribution of wrongful death proceeds. I'm not going to identify the judge in this case, but one of my favorite Beatles shares the same last name. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on this case before I get to the punchline. And I've got some dark humor. So at one point in the story, we're going to talk about domestic violence. Tough topic to deal with, but you're going to laugh when it's done. So at trial, we had to prepare character cards at the table to help identify all the players. So I'm going to run you through 4 of them. There was a Boo. The second person was Boo Boo. Keep in mind, this was not during Halloween. Then we had a Junior. And this is where it got a little tricky. We kept referring to Junior, and it turns out that this individual had 2 juniors. He loved himself so much that with every female that he was with, the firstborn son was Junior. So there was literally 2 juniors from the same dad. And now to get to the domestic violence. So when Boo is in the witness stand, we get to a discussion about her getting into an argument with somebody. And she says that he hit me. And I didn't know how far to push this line of questioning. Since we were into the domestic violence arena, I said, well, what did you do next? And she says, I got up and I hit him. And then when he ran away, I chased him down and I beat his ass. But that's not even the best part. I give you all this as the backdrop to what happens at trial. The funniest thing that actually happened in this case happened at the beginning of trial. And opposing counsel isn't part of our bar association, and you might be able to identify who this is later. But before this trial starts, we're ready and we're waiting for opposing counsel to show up, to the point where the judge's secretary has to call opposing counsel's office, They indicate that opposing counsel's on the way. So we're running about a half hour behind on a motion. And I'm the only person in court. It's me, the judge, the staff, and opposing counsel walks into court. And as the judge starts putting our case on the record, this is what I see. Opposing counsel tells the judge, just hold on for a second while I finish my phone call. Well, it was at that point I figured my case was going to go swimmingly. That's what I've got for you.
Thank you, Dan. That was good. All right. Next, another intense litigator is Mr. Cashin. Bill, are you ready? You got to unmute, Bill.
Yeah, how's that?
That's good.
And I'm loving these stories, Dave. That is real interesting, you know, with Dan, you know, with the guy on the phone. I did have one of my business court judges schedule something when I had a trial in Oakland probate, and the answer was, well, you can just step out of the courtroom and zoom in for my conference. And I thought, how am I going to tell Judge O'Brien in Oakland probate court, just a minute, I have to go take a call. So it's funny because we run into some of the same experiences, right? John MacArthur mentioned old Judge Nowicki, who is famous for, we met in chambers a lot more then than we do now, you know, and give the judge kind of the lowdown of what was going on. And he would say, good, well, go in the courtroom and let the perjury begin. Or I go back with Pat on a transvestite, you'd have to ask Judge Surowski about, he had a transvestite truck driver with a defective equipment ticket. And he wasn't making it up. And the crazy part was, after the hearing, he said the bailiff came in and said, Judge, that guy went into the ladies' bathroom. And judge says they looked it up and they couldn't find a law anywhere on the books that says you can't do that. So the judge said, well, just go in and check on him. And the bailiff, a big burly guy, said, I'm not going in there. No way. So you run into all of those stories. But as I was trying to think of one here, the biggest thing that got me is just my personal, you know, experiences over the years with the probate court, because I've done the litigation. I've been fortunate to have Don Strail as a partner for over 30 years now. He's a public administrator. I also have my partner Megan Cashin now, who also is a public administrator, and I would get all the spin-off litigation. And what amazed me is the differences between the litigation in the probate court versus, you know, other courts, circuit courts. And one of them is the fees, because generally it's your American rule. But in probate court, if you can get your client in as a fiduciary, you're on behalf of an estate, well, now maybe your fees are chargeable to the estate or the trust or the conservatorship estate. So you have these different hats and different roles and posturing as to what's going to be most advantageous for you to get in. You can recover the non-probate transfers. So I've literally seen, you know, one heir, the estate, sue the other heir over a convenience account, lose, and then capture that account anyway as a non-probate transfer to pay the attorney fees in the estate for the unsuccessful litigation. And that doesn't happen in business court. You certainly don't get fees. You certainly don't get them if you lose. So I've saw some of those differences. And you really, especially as a public administrator, but all the fiduciaries are under the court supervisory authority. And that can get interesting because we had one situation I'll relate with Judge George back when she was on the bench. A lady owned a couple Jets Pizza franchises, which were amazing. They were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, even though they had under, you know, $5,000 worth of equipment in these strip centers. But the brand, the name was very valuable. And she, you know, had a lot of money, had their professionals in Bloomfield Hills put everything over, transfer everything over to her son's name. And unfortunately, the son then was killed in a drunk driving accident in Gaylord. And so the business would go to his wife and kids, which was not what mom had in mind, or mom's daughter, the guy's sister. So she became conservator for mom, sued son's estate to set aside all the transfers and put the businesses back in mom's name. And the interesting part was that Judge George was the presiding judge. You have supervisory authority over the conservatorship estate. She was also the judge over the decedent's estate and could basically instruct us what to do as her fiduciaries. She was also the judge on the CZ case between the two entities. And I wasn't sure what to do with that because they didn't tell me any of that kind of stuff in law school. But to make a long story short, we come in one day and there's a couple attorneys in a conference room the judge appointed to settle our case. And they hand wrote out a settlement agreement, sell the businesses, split the money between the two estates. We go into court and Judge George says, well, Mr. Cashin, put your settlement on the record. I'm like, Judge, I don't have a settlement. I think Dan might have been on this case. I think Dan might have said it's not my settlement either, but it got settled. So I've never seen a dynamic like that outside of probate court, but it did, strike me as something very different dynamic. So when you're in probate court, really keep that in mind. What hats are you wearing? What hats could your client wear? And how do those dynamics come into play, which is, a lot more engaging sometimes than, my straight business litigation stuff where you have your client and that's it. Your client has to pay you and you have to chase them around for your fees. So that, was my story, how that case got settled for us, but really just the illustration of how those dynamics can come into play. Just one more thing, Judge Harrison, you've heard her some of the stuff she's seen. I was in her court once and they zoom in. The guy's literally in bed. He's laying down in bed under the covers with his phone up to his face. Poor judge said, sir, could you at least get out of bed and get dressed and go sit at the table so we can do the hearing? So there's going to be a million Zoom stories, but Judge Harrison reminded me of that one. So that's my contribution today. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. I've only got a couple more left. And for some of the people that I asked to come in, they said, are you going to do one? And I said, we don't know. I said, I'm going to do what you're going to do it. So I will tell a very short one. I have many Judge Marlinga stories. My favorite was asked 2 weeks before trial to step in and try the case. The other attorney wasn't up to it. And when I stepped into the case, I realized they'd done no discovery. So long story short, I didn't have a case. We have to try this thing anyway. So I'm trying. And I'm getting my rear end handed to me, as you would expect. And at one point, I objected to a statement by a witness on a hearsay basis. And he looks at me and says, what's that based on? I'm thinking, oh, God, this is the evidence king, right? And now I'm going to be arguing an evidence thing. And he wants to debate. Judge Marlinga, those who've been in front of him, he loves this stuff, especially evidence. He loves to debate it. I want this trial to get over with so I could just take my, put my tail between my legs and leave. But no, we went a half hour on this because he loves this stuff. And he said, well, I decided this. What did you decide, Mr. Forrest? Who gives a damn what I would have thought on this? But, we did it. And it so happened that it was a unique area. Bill knows this one well. On joint bank account cases, there are some evidentiary issues buried in case law, mitzvah, stuff like that. So we're debating this. It's a half hour. I'm thinking, just overrule me, please. Just overrule me. Just finish this thing. And we did finish, and I didn't lose. So that was my Judge Marlinga case. Anyway, Renee has also volunteered very nicely to do this with a little cajoling. So Renee Teagle, stage is yours.
Well, mine is a Zoom case. It happened early in during COVID. And as you remember, the courts were closed. So all the hearings were being held via Zoom, and the hearing was being streamed on YouTube so that everybody could have access to the hearings. And so this was in front of Judge Harrison, and I don't remember why, but I was sitting in for the clerk that day and pulled up a case. It was a minor guardianship case. And all three people who were appearing were all in the same computer. Pulled them up. We had like a 2 or 3 year old toddler and two women. I'm thinking one was grandma and one was the mom. And it was very clear that everybody had just woken up. Their hair is a mess. They're wearing their pajamas. and one woman's wearing a nightgown with spaghetti straps. And judge is always very gracious, very nice to people. We start having the hearing, and it's a little bit of a sticky one, so it takes a while, except about 15 minutes into the hearing, the woman with the spaghetti strap nightgown on says, "Wait a minute, what's that?" And judge asks her, "What are you talking about?" And figures out that what she's talking about is the little symbol on the screen that says it's being streamed on YouTube. And the lady says, "YouTube? I'm not dressed for YouTube." And she starts covering herself up, which she probably should have done 15 minutes earlier. That's when I realized that our lives as we knew it in court were changing.
Renee, that was a good one. I appreciate it. Last but not least, because I don't see Mr. Heitmanis here because he's in trial apparently, is Wayne Wilson, who regaled us 5 years ago with, by the way, one that is still on YouTube to this day. Speaking of YouTube, it's the only thing the probate bar has ever posted. It's there. And this one probably is going to get posted too. So hope you're all dressed for YouTube for this one as well. Wayne, are you ready to go?
Oh, yeah, I'm ready to go. I was reminded of one thing, listening about telephone calls in court. A bar member of our association is up in front of the judge at the podium, and her phone rings, and she stops her argument to the judge and answers her phone, and then walks off and continues with the conversation. But that's another story. Anyway, I had a case that happened over 50 years ago, so this is an old one. There was a school teacher strike in Warren Woods, and there was a law firm that wanted to try get an injunction to force the teachers back to work. And at that time, Macomb lawyers hated Detroit lawyers, and Detroit lawyers hated Macomb lawyers. So the law firm hired me to sit in as a local attorney. And that was my job because the teachers or the unions always got locked up with settle the case, and no case was ever tried. Well, we had Judge Sinar, and Walt was a defense attorney, and he always hated that he was forced to settle. So he's not going to settle this case. He's going to try it. We started the trial on a Saturday, and we're working Saturday diligently. And it looks like this trial is going to go longer and go into Sunday. But it was felt that it couldn't go into Sunday due to the fact that that's a holiday. So Walt started taking judicial notice of the time. When it was 10 o'clock, he took judicial notice that it was actually 8 o'clock at night. And he kept going with that so that he entered his order before midnight, even though it was 1:30 in the morning. So that was back then when we used to do all sorts of things. But, trying a case till 1:30 in the morning in court, that never will happen again. So that's my story.
Thanks, Wayne. I appreciate it. And thanks to all our presenters and all of you who came. I'm glad we were able to do this and share stories. It's part of our legacy, and maybe we'll do this again another 5 years. So with that, have a great day, everyone. Take care.